She didn't save you. She silenced you. You told yourself it was love, but love doesn't come with that kind of hunger. What you really wanted was anesthesia, a pause, a shield. Not from her, from the voice inside that's been whispering your unworthiness since you were a boy. Carl Jung warned us, men don't fall in love, they fall into projection. You didn't need her warmth. You needed her to mute the winter inside your chest. Every smile, every kiss, every argument was just your unconscious screaming for recognition. You thought you missed her? No, you missed who you got to pretend to be in her arms. She was the last distraction before you had to meet yourself. And now that she's gone, the mirror cracks. This video isn't comfort, it's confession of the void you've mistaken for desire, of the woman you worshipped just to avoid facing the ruins. And if you're ready to finally listen, not to her, but to what her silence reveals, you're home. He told himself she was the cure. But late at night, it wasn't her he missed. It was a voice he buried years ago, the kind that asked real questions, the kind that didn't flatter. She was never the melody, just the pause between beats, loud enough to echo. And when she left, the silence didn't begin, it returned. He didn't crave her affection, he craved a mirror. Someone to reflect the man he wanted to be, but hadn't dared to meet. It wasn't about her laughter or presence. It was the way she distracted him from his own. That kind of hunger isn't for touch, it's for identity. And identity built on noise always fractures in quiet. He begged her to stay, but it wasn't love, it was fear of stillness. The kind that drips into your veins when the screen turns off and no one texts back. The kind that makes you look at the wall and wonder if anyone really sees you. And in that void, her absence didn't echo. You did. Your own voice, abandoned and starved, finally coming home. She wasn't a partner, she was a placeholder, a soft answer to a question he was too tired to ask. He wanted her to fill a silence that wasn't hers to fix. And when she failed, he blamed her. Instead of the echo chamber, he called comfort. But comfort without confrontation is how men quietly rot. The real wound, not her absence, but the absence of self. A man who doesn't know his own voice will drown in any woman's. And every time she didn't respond, it wasn't rejection, it was withdrawal from the drug. She was the anesthesia, not the healer. And now the pain you numbed is the voice you must hear. That echo, it wasn't a memory of her. It was a mirror of your own exhaustion. She became the function of your unprocessed past, not its solution. And the more she smiled, the more it hurt, because deep down you knew she was never speaking to the part of you that bled. Jung said we project what we can't hold, and you projected worth, wholeness, even meaning, onto someone who never asked for that job. She didn't betray you. She held a mirror you couldn't survive. That's the thing about illusions. They feel like home until they don't. And the echo that followed her wasn't hers. It was your silence, returning with interest. Now you sit in that room, scrolling through old messages, thinking it's nostalgia, but it's not. It's self-recognition filtered through her image, because she didn't disappear. Your echo did. And maybe, just maybe, that's the part you need to find again. He said he missed her, but what he really missed was relief. Relief from himself, from the noise inside his own skin. That craving, the ache to be seen, to be held, to be chosen. It wasn't love. It was anesthesia with lipstick. Every time she walked into the room, his lungs remembered how to breathe. But not because she gave him air, because he never learned to take his own. And so her presence became oxygen, not because she was necessary, but because he was absent. The craving didn't prove connection, it proved dependence. Solitude terrified him, not because it was empty, but because it was honest. He wore masculinity like armor, but it was hollow beneath. He called his hunger loyalty. He called his panic missing her. But panic is not proof of love, it's proof of abandonment, self-abandonment. She didn't rescue him. She didn't even know what to save. He clung to her like a drowning man clings to driftwood, but even driftwood can't carry a man forever. And the more he clung, the more she drifted, because no woman wants to be a substitute for air. That desire he chased, it wasn't affection, it was terror, dressed as romance. He feared silence more than betrayal. He feared being alone with his thoughts more than losing her, and so he chased and called it love. But love isn't the absence of fear, it's the presence of self. And if your identity collapses when she stops texting, you were never in love. You were in hiding, and she was just the excuse you used to avoid yourself. He built a prison and painted her name on the bars, told himself she had the key, but it was never locked from the outside. It was his own fear of breathing his own air, of facing his own voice, that kept him trapped. She wasn't the lifeline. His fear was. Now that she's gone, he feels empty. But that emptiness isn't new. It was just revealed. You don't grieve her. You grieve the silence she used to cover, and the air you fear is the only air that was ever yours to breathe. He kept texting, not for closure, but for confirmation. Confirmation that he still existed in someone else's world. Every argument, every late-night call was a desperate attempt to hear his own echo, not in her words, but in her reaction. Because when you lose your voice, even conflict feels like connection. He didn't want peace. He wanted proof. Proof that he mattered, that he could still stir emotion. Even rage felt better than indifference, because silence, real silence, exposed the fracture. And in that fracture, he could no longer lie. She became a stage, not a partner. Every "I miss you" was a line in a script he wrote to avoid his own absence. It wasn't conversation, it was performance. And when she didn't reply, he wasn't hurt by her silence. He was hurt by the mirror it held up. He chased noise like it was love, because stillness made him confront the weight of his own failure to build an identity without her applause. He mistook chaos for intimacy, but some men only feel alive when something is burning. Her voice wasn't what soothed him. It was the illusion that he still had one. And when the illusion cracked, when she grew quiet, he felt like a ghost inside his own body, because all the noise had been external. He told himself they had something special, but what they really had was mutual projection, two people yelling into each other, hoping to hear themselves back. It was never about resolution, it was about being recognized. Even in anger, you can't build identity through reaction. Every time she didn't respond, the silence screamed, because deep down he wasn't asking her to understand. He was asking her to validate his existence, but a man who needs to be seen to feel real is already gone. She didn't speak for him. His longing did, and when longing speaks louder than reason, even pain feels like love. But love that needs to fight to be heard isn't love. It's an echo chamber of the soul, screaming for someone to translate it. And now, in the stillness, the only voice left to hear is his own. He waited for her to say, "I'm proud of you," but every time she didn't, something inside him crumbled. Not because her silence was cruel, but because his self-respect was conditional. He tied his worth to her nods, her moods, her attention span, and called it love. She didn't become his compass. He just stopped carrying one. The moment he let her opinion replace his direction, he surrendered something sacred. Purpose isn't found in someone else's eyes, but when you're empty, reflection looks like clarity. And clarity, when outsourced, becomes a leash. He didn't want her guidance. He wanted to be seen as good. Not strong, not sovereign, just good enough to be kept. And so he reshaped himself daily, softer here, quieter there, traded discipline for affection, and in the end became a man even he couldn't respect. He called it partnership, but it was worship. Every compliment was a dose, every criticism a collapse, because his identity didn't rest on truth, it rested on her tone. She wasn't manipulative, he was just lost, and used her to draw the map. There's a kind of man who forgets his mission when he feels love. He folds into her needs like origami. It looks beautiful for a moment until the shape stops breathing. Purpose doesn't survive on praise. It survives on pain, solitude, and brutal honesty. The irony? She respected him less the more he sought her approval. Because even the most modern woman still longs for a man who can walk alone, not coldly, but clearly. And every time he looked to her for permission, she looked away. Not out of cruelty, out of instinct. She didn't guide him, his lack of direction did. She simply stood where his spine used to be, and when he asked, "What do you want from me?" she didn't answer, because that wasn't her role to fill. That question belonged to a boy. Survival isn't earned through her approval. It's reclaimed in solitude, when the mirror breaks and you have no choice but to face what's left. She wasn't the lodestar. Emptiness was. And the longer he ran from that truth, the louder it called. He didn't want too much. He just wanted someone to fill the space where his soul used to speak. But because he never named the fracture, his desire came out distorted. It clung, it begged, it obsessed. And the more he felt, the more she pulled away. He called it passion. She called it pressure. Because what he labeled as love was really survival. He didn't want to merge. He wanted to disappear into her, not out of romance, but because his own reflection haunted him. She was the silence he used to drown the scream. The wound was old. Long before she walked in, he'd already been hollowed. By a father's absence, a mother's control, a world that only rewarded function. So he attached to anything that mirrored warmth, even if it burned. Desire should be expression. But when it grows in a fracture, it becomes addiction. He needed her to respond, to validate, to save him from himself. And when she didn't, he shattered, not because she failed, but because his entire identity was leaning on her answer. She didn't inflate his need. His void did. That bottomless ache, born from years of silence and performance, found a vessel. She wasn't ready to be a savior, but he handed her the cross anyway. And when she collapsed beneath it, he called her unfaithful. Attachment isn't intimacy. It's a defense mechanism, a desperate grasp for control. He wasn't trying to love her. He was trying not to disappear. And so every message, every plea was a confession. Please make me real. The tragedy? She never had a chance to know him. Only his hunger, only his unspoken scream wrapped in compliments and compliance. And when she finally left, he wasn't heartbroken. He was exposed. She didn't anchor his love. His fracture did. And until he dares to name that fracture, not patch it, not numb it, he will keep mistaking desperation for devotion and calling it love when it's really escape. He called her his other half. But halves are for things that break, not for people who forget themselves. She didn't complete him. She just stood still long enough for him to project his missing pieces onto her. And he mistook her patience for destiny. He gave up his voice before she asked for it. Stopped speaking truth, started speaking her language, not to connect but to survive. Because if she left, so did his reason for being. That's not love. That's self-erasure. Completion isn't something you find. It's something you reclaim, piece by painful piece. But he didn't want to do that work. He wanted her to be the finish line. So he handed her the burden of becoming his silence. She didn't silence him. He silenced himself, out of fear that speaking would cost him her affection. Every time he felt something true, he swallowed it. Traded voice for peace, but peace built on suppression is just delayed collapse. He wasn't looking for a partner, he was looking for a container, someone to hold what he refused to carry. She didn't fill the void, she just stood close enough to distract him from it. She tolerated him, not because he was weak, but because he made himself small. She stayed, not out of love, but out of habit, and he mistook survival for connection. But connection without confrontation isn't intimacy, it's dependency. He said, "She understands me." But how can someone understand a man who's muted his essence? She couldn't hear him because he never spoke. He didn't want to be understood. He wanted to be kept. She didn't fill him. He emptied. And until he confronts the reasons he gave up his voice, he will keep choosing silence dressed as love and wonder why he always feels like a ghost in his own life. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. He said he loved her, but it wasn't her he saw. It was who he became in her gaze. She made him feel interesting, wanted, whole, not because he was, but because he had forgotten how to see himself. She became the only mirror that didn't crack. He didn't fall for her. He fell for the version of himself that smiled when she walked in. When she left, it wasn't her he missed. It was that brief illusion of purpose, of aliveness. He chased the reflection, not the woman. Her world became his escape. Her routines, his calendar, her dramas, his justification for staying distracted. He became fluent in her needs and foreign to his own. She didn't demand it. He volunteered. Avoidance doesn't always look like retreat. Sometimes it looks like devotion. He made her center stage so he wouldn't have to perform in his own life. She lit up every room. But in the process, his own fire dimmed to shadows. He confused meaning with presence. If she smiled, he had worth. If she frowned, he had failed. His reflection became conditional, and every time she turned away, he shattered. Because he didn't have a mirror of his own. She didn't shape him. His avoidance did. Avoidance of purpose, avoidance of silence, avoidance of the man in the mirror. She was the distraction that looked like connection, and by the time he realized it, he couldn't remember his own face, not without her eyes to define it. Integration begins with solitude, not as punishment, but as resurrection. A return to the self that doesn't disappear when the room empties. He didn't lose her, he lost himself and called it romance. She didn't echo his presence, he hollowed it. She walked beside him, unaware she was being used as scaffolding. And now that she's gone, the collapse isn't about her, it's the ruins of a man who forgot to build his own reflection. He says she shattered him, but the truth is, she simply left. And the silence she left behind screamed. Not her fault. She didn't know she was the last barrier between him and the ache he's avoided since boyhood. The haunting began long before she kissed him. He didn't fall out of love. He fell back into the ache, the one he numbed with her presence. She was the noise that kept the ghosts at bay, and now that she's gone, the ghosts speak freely. They don't shout. They whisper the truth he never wanted to hear. This pain isn't new. It's recycled. It's inherited. It's personal. He's mourning not a woman, but the illusion that someone else could save him from himself. It always starts that way. They smile, he breathes. They leave, he breaks. But what shatters isn't love. It's the lie. He told himself she was different. She saw him, chose him, needed him. But she didn't see the wound he wrapped in laughter. She didn't know she was touching a scar, not a soul. And when she left, the bandage was ripped. The real heartbreak, it's not about who left. It's about what rises in the absence. The weight, the confusion, the endless loop of what did I do wrong? But it's not about wrongdoing. It's about not recognizing your own haunting. She didn't destroy him. His fracture did. Because a man who depends on someone else to feel whole is always seconds away from collapse. And when that collapse comes, he calls it heartbreak. But it's really a reunion with everything he tried to avoid. Heartbreak isn't about loss, it's about lack. The lack that's been following him for years, masked by work, substances, sex, distractions. She was the last veil. And now that it's gone, there's no one left to blame. She didn't leave you. Your void did. And it's waiting for you, not to destroy, but to be named. Because the soul doesn't heal by forgetting, it heals by facing what haunts it, and daring to walk through the ruins barefoot. What if it was never about her? What if every text, every ache, every silent night was just your soul asking one question? Will you finally come back to me? Because she wasn't the wound, she was the bandage. And the longer you keep chasing replacements, the longer you stay a stranger in your own life. You weren't meant to orbit someone else's light. You were meant to become the fire that doesn't beg to burn. So I'll leave you with this. Are you still mourning her, or are you finally ready to face the silence she left behind? Because in that silence is your name, and it's time you answered it. Subscribe, turn on notifications, continue this journey of brutal self-knowledge and emotional freedom. If you thought love was your escape, wait until you realize what addiction really is. Not craving, not weakness, but the soul's last attempt to be heard. In the next video, Jung exposes the brutal truth. You're not chasing pleasure, you're running from yourself.